Hi everyone, welcome back to this another session, power packed session. And thank you, Natalie, for giving the audience a brief on the perspectives of the Asian market, the investors, the incubators, and the accelerators. Moving ahead as the day goes along, let me introduce the next speaker. He's Sandiip Bhammer. He's the co-founder at GFC, Green Frontier Capitals. And personally, I have been very intrigued and surprised, basically, to see how an investor, a person, an individual can be multidimensional when it comes to pushing agendas focused on climate change. To the audience, let me give a brief. I have been interacting with Sandeep for the last couple of months now, and I'm surprised by how he has gained a perfect experience on the grounds of how different perspectives work. And I have had numerous discussions, and for me personally, it has been to understand what is going in the background, how things work. And he has never focused himself. What we have seen in the industry, he has been working on climate change innovation specifically, keeping in mind electricity, electric vehicles, keeping in mind food products, and likewise. So he brings along a vast diaspora of experience. And this is what today's session focuses on, identifying the global perspective associated with investors keeping in mind. I welcome you, Sandeep, again to the session, and thank you for giving time today.
Thank you, sir. Thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
So I will quickly jump into the first question that we have identified for you. See, I have seen you have been working with GFC. You created GFC back in 21. And since then, a lot has happened in this industry. We come from a background of alternative proteins. So my question will be very specific to this industry. So based on your personal experience and the GFC's experience, how the alternative protein industry has evolved and what does the future hold?
So, I'll try and answer that answer your questions from two perspectives. I actually am in a very unique position because although I invest in India, I'm actually based physically in the US. So I get to see the entire dynamics of the smart protein, plant protein businesses from both the US as well as from an Indian perspective. So first, let me kind of share with you what my thoughts are on the global industry side, and then I'll actually talk about how I feel India has evolved, right? So we have, obviously, as a firm, we were early in the space and we witnessed significant evolution in the alternative protein industry, particularly in the West, in how consumer preferences and technological advancements and environmental awareness have converged to propel the industry forward. So initially, alternative proteins in the West were niche products, but now they've gained mainstream acceptance, which have been driven by innovations that have improved the taste, the texture, and the nutritional profiles of the underlying products. I was an early investor in a company in the US called Eat Just, which has a 99% market share of the alternative protein industry as far as eggs are concerned. And one of the resistances of people basically pivoting from eating real eggs to plant-based eggs was the pricing. And the flavor, of course, is going to be there, but there was also the pricing aspect. So finally, after years and years of research as well as expansion, today the prices of plant protein-based eggs have actually reached parity levels with real eggs, and therefore the pivot is taking place much faster because people are saying, look, I really want to make a difference to the environment. So looking ahead, in that regards, we anticipate further developments and advancements in production efficiency and product diversity. And therefore, we feel that making alternative proteins increasingly competitive with traditional animal proteins will be the driving factor that will actually cause people to shift. So clearly, in my view and the view of our firm, the future holds a much more sustainable food system where alternative proteins will play a crucial role in meeting global dietary needs with a lower environmental footprint. Now, that was as far as the West is concerned. Now let's look at India.
Mhm.
So, as you and me have spoken about this in the past, India's alternative protein industry is emerging against a backdrop of traditionally vegetarian society,
Right.
with a growing openness now finally to novel food technologies. So,
Mhm.
if you see, recent trends, India has seen an uptick in consumer interest towards plant-based and cell-based proteins, which are largely driven by rising health consciousness, environmental concerns, and ethical considerations.
Right.
So, India is quickly becoming a base for international players to kind of use from a manufacturing perspective. So, India also provides the unique advantage in that while the transition is taking place and it's taking place so much slowly, it's coming off of a lower base. So the growth rates are higher. But India is also quickly emerging or will emerge to become an outsourcing center for, uh, you know, all protein manufacturing, because it's very, very expensive to do this in the global north. The global south has cheaper engineering talent, cheaper physical infrastructure. So there will be India will be able to leverage itself from a cost perspective to cater to the pivot that's already happening in the West and is much further ahead than India. And Indian players will also uh, you know be supported by a huge growth in the domestic startup industry. So the anticipated increase in protein demand internationally as well as in India due to population growth and economic
Mhm.
development further underscores the sector's potential. So there's a lot of promise for the West, of course, and
Mhm.
there is even more promise for India. May not necessarily be from a consumption perspective immediately, but
Mhm.
definitely as an outsourcing base for the needs that actually emanate from the Western world. So to answer
Right.
your question?
Yeah, perfect. It fits perfectly, and I think I would put it this way. I will take the opportunity to say that yes, it fits with the vision of Clear Meat also. I know it's not right to do to say it right now, but yes, and I totally agree with you. And this is what we have been observing personally also in the last couple of months, how the shift is happening. Now, I have an observation here. You speak about India and how the globe looks at and how it has evolved and how it is growing, alternative protein specifically. But from what we also see on ground, we divide alternative protein into two parts. One is plant-based and another is animal-based. And we have seen with respect to the innovation, the acceleration of this segment, the Asian market and the Western market have different approaches. So do you think Asia and West is ready to have announced views on these two broad segments?
Well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, protein consumption is always much lower than especially in the global south than it is in the global north.
Mhm.
So therefore, we don't have the choice of actually being discretionary in how those proteins are going to be developed, whether it comes to the plant route or it comes to the cell based route.
Mhm.
uh, the West, of course, there are considerations such as time to market, product market fit, how long the product is going to basically reach consumers' plates, how much capital you have to spend, and therefore, in that regards, while the longer term cell based protein production is the preferred route,
Mhm.
there's a lot of work that still remains to be done in that segment. Think about it. There are only two companies in the world so far that have received a regulatory approval
Yes.
to
Yes.
actually sell, cell-based meat today.
Yes.
Um, in spite of the fact that work was started on this several years ago.
Yes.
So, unless there is huge pools of capital available, patient capital, that makes these products on par with their incumbent products that they're trying to replace. It's a longer term kind of an investment story. So I do think that as far as the West is concerned, plant based protein will actually win out in the short term because it's a
Mhm.
ready made product that's available today. It's and price parity, like I said, is being achieved in certain segments. So plant-based protein will actually win in the short term, but in the long term, obviously, I think once the technology is proven, cell-based technologies will win. But India, on the other hand, will leapfrog because it will actually not have to innovate at all.
Right.
You don't have too many companies like Clear Meat in India that are actually doing true innovation.
Right.
Largely, India has been an adopter of technologies that have actually come out from the West. So if we actually find that cell-based technologies become cost efficient from a consumption perspective, then India will actually immediately pivot to a cell-based technology route rather than a plant-based technology route, right?
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree with you on these lines, and I feel from my obviously you have more vaster exposure, and you are working hardcore when it comes to climate change, sustainability, alternative protein, and all these multi domains that are interlinked with each other and push the idea or vision of bringing down CGHS and taking charge of various factors. Yes, India does have the capacity to bring down the right price parity and bring down the right innovation and become an ingredient supplier to the globe. Now, yes, so from your discussion, we do realize that yes, as an investor, you are trying to understand how alternative protein industry is growing, what will be the demands, and how consumer perception is changing, the behavior either from protein expectations, the price parity, likewise. But there is one more factor that is policy. So, from your experiences, and you have been part of Eat Just, you have seen how Singapore has taken lead into it. So, from your own experience, what do you see? What role do policymakers and regulators have in lifting the cell based meat ecosystem? And what are some of the key factors that need to be thought of before approving of the cell based meat? Safety and
Yeah.
health concerns aside, is the impact of traditional meat selling industry also something that needs to be factored in? That is perhaps relevant because it is almost like a new category.
Yeah, sure. Good question. So obviously, policymakers and regulators play a very pivotal role in the cell-based meat ecosystem because they actually set the safety standards for the product suite. Also, they provide clear regulatory pathways for product approval, and finally, foster an environment that encourages innovation while ensuring public health. So, before approving the sale of cell-based meat, considerations beyond safety and health concerns must be included, which include environmental impacts as well as economic implications for traditional meat industries. Because as you know, traditional meat industries currently in many countries, provide significant revenue.
Yes.
In India, we actually, surprisingly, even though we are a vegetarian nation, we are one of the largest exporters of meat in the world. I don't know if you
Yes.
know that.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So while it's, so if we were to actually pivot, very quickly to plant-based or cell-based meat industries, what happens to those industries? There's going to be a furor, right? Because it employs so many people. So while it's crucial to support innovation and sustainable food sources, it's also very, very important to manage these transitions for these existing industries, potentially through either retraining programs or for absorbing these people into the new industries that are coming out, or incentives for adopting sustainable practices. So to that extent, the role of policymakers and regulators cannot be understated. Now, from an India perspective, also the role of policymakers and regulators is critical, especially because we have to nurture the alternative protein ecosystem like a
Right.
baby.
Right.
There should be clear guidelines, there should be support for research and development, and only then will the industry pick up, because that will allow the participants to accelerate the commercialization of cell-based meats.
Right.
As you know, regulatory frameworks will ensure, like I've said, even in the West, product safety, while promoting innovation is going to be key. So for India, it's all about innovation. Also, in India, we have, traditional livestock farming. So livestock farming actually is, like I said, a very, very big industry. And if alternative proteins actually emerge successfully, the livestock farming is an industry which could be potentially displaced. So, like the West, in India specifically, we need to understand how industries like livestock farming, etc., are going to be going to survive or will transition. And therefore, like I've suggested, even in the West, our focus should be on skilling, reskilling, and providing alternative livelihoods to people whose industries are going to get displaced by the shift. And these are all parts of the role of policymakers and regulators.
Yes, yes, and they play a very vital role. And this is something which many people have even asked me personally, that what happens to those people who are already in this industry, which is well established and giving a lot of revenue. You rightly pointed, India is one of the leading suppliers of meat. The pink revolution was focused on that agenda only.
Yeah.
I also am of the opinion you need to do reskilling, because once we scale up, there will be a day we will be doing mass productions. That day, the current brains available are not sufficient enough to take charge of this. So we need more manpower to handle this. So yes, there needs to be a shift, and yes, policy. I do totally agree with you. Policymakers play a very significant role, because it is not only making the right product, which is consumer centric, but also identifying the right chain and waste management and various factors which are interlinked with the whole process.
Very true.
Yeah.
In fact, increase consumer awareness of the environmental and health benefits.
Yes. Yes.
Who is going to do that? Obviously, if you're a startup,
Hmm.
most of the capital that you raise as a startup is going to be focused on research and development. You can't
Right.
be spending your money on building awareness of your product from an environmental and health benefit standpoint. So the government has to do that.
Right.
And it is only when a nuanced understanding of these segments is achieved through educational and awareness campaigns
Mhm.
will the startups who are involved in this industry uh, help consumers appreciate the differences and benefits of the products that you're actually manufacturing, which will
Yeah.
then only lead to widespread adoption across diverse markets. Otherwise, without that, how is it going to help? So the
No,
government must play that role.
agreed. I totally agree with you, and I think that is what we have also shared with you, and that is the prime reason we year on year do this sustainable meat solution event, to make the audience aware and make the concept, the miscommunications around it, clear these clouds, and make it more possible for consumer to accept when the options are there, bringing the right thought processes in place. And you will be surprised. Today's agendas are also focused on that. Later in the day, we have discussions on how government plays a vital role. What is the policy standoff globally, and likewise. So I totally agree with you, and I'm on that with you. Moving ahead, I know we are short of time, but moving ahead, I have a last question for you. This is a slightly tricky question, but still, you can skip it if you want. The question is: many countries, I would say, are of the opinion of promoting cell-based cultivated meat, and handful of them are, if I'm using the right word, I might not be using the right word, are lobbying against it. In the last couple of
Mm.
months, we have seen. How do you feel it will impact the whole sustainability vision that alternative protein industry is trying to resolve?
Listen, as they say, loha ko lohe ko kaatta hai, right? So
Right.
if you actually have uh, current lobbyists who are actually opposing, the advent and the growth of, sustainable industries or food systems, because the traditional agricultural sector is going to be basically economically displaced,
Right.
then what's stopping, the cell-based and plant protein businesses also from actually installing their own lobbyists?
Right.
And in
Right.
fact, the diverging opinions and lobbying activities surrounding cell-based and cultivated meat actually highlight the complex socio-economic and ethical considerations involved in transitioning to a more sustainable food system. So balancing these interests is tricky and challenging, but it is necessary to achieve broader sustainability goals of the alternative protein industry. How are we going to achieve this? Through constructive dialogue,
Mhm.
inclusive policy making, and transitional support for affected industries that can help align stakeholders towards the common goal of a sustainable, equitable food system.
Mhm.
As far as India is concerned,
Mhm.
India's journey towards sustainable food solutions, including alternative proteins, is definitely going to encounter resistance from established agricultural and meat industries. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you know, but the political involvement in agriculture and in meat industries is the highest. So the same people basically who are making policy are the ones who have the highest vested interests in ensuring that the industries don't pivot. But at the end of the day, look, India needs to address and urgently address food security, right? We need to address malnutrition,
Right.
and we need to address climate change.
Right.
So
I think
balancing traditional practices with these innovative food technologies is the need of the hour. And like I said, as is happening in the West, must include inclusive dialogue and collaboration among stakeholders. And the successful integration, India really has a chance here to show the rest of the world that the successful integration of alternative proteins into a diet is a model for sustainable development, which is aligning with India's broader goals of health, wellness, and environmental stewardship. And we have a prime minister who has actually gone on global stage to say that
yes.
these are India's priorities. So
Yes.
we have the leadership in place.
Yes.
And therefore, anything that India does right now can actually set the precedent for what other countries actually do to follow. So this is India's golden chance to ensure that traditional agricultural industries exist hand in hand with these new innovative food technologies, and that therefore I'm a huge believer that as we explore opportunities in this space, we are very optimistic about these industries contributing to a future where sustainable and healthful eating options are accessible to all Indians, serving both the nation's development and global environmental goals.
I would honestly say, and I would not have expected such a beautiful response to this tricky question. And you've rightly placed the whole concept and the whole vision of all, sustainability and alternative protein. And yes, India it has a golden opportunity to push this. And I'm very confident that this will truly happen with the support of various stakeholders like you and companies like us. It has to happen in a couple of days, and we are working collectively to do that. So, with this, I thank you, Sandeep, again for sharing your valuable time and giving the audience a perspective of how GFC thinks about it and what's the global and the Indian perspective. And I hope the audience liked it. We will not be taking any questions today, but yes, we will get in touch with you once we have some questions and we'll be sharing those for your responses. Thank you, Sandeep, once again.
Thanks, Siddharth. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Take care.